Now, if you ever noticed in a lot of TV show genres, they always have like a staple type of story they always tell. Like, for example, in sci-fi action adventure shows, they love doing shrink ray episodes. In Power Rangers case, they love doing body swap episodes. There's many, many episodes between the Rangers themselves that swap bodies or they get swapped with monsters. And so I wanted to look at Power Rangers body swap episodes and see where they fall.
The grass is always greener or bluer.
Well, this one I considered the worst of the body swap episodes, mainly because it is based off the Gokaiger episode that did the exact same plot, but there was one key difference why it doesn't really work, and I never cared for it. It's because they changed the characters who were body swapped. In Gokaiger, it was Doc and Gokai Yellow. In Super Mega Force, they switched it with Jake and Noah. And this comes back to the problem with the characters. And they didn't get much to do, so we don't know who they really are, especially Noah. Noah was the most neglected. Yeah, he is the genius, he's the smart guy, but, compared to Billy, for example, Billy got a ton of episodes where he saved the day, he's learned, he progressed. Noah, what has he done at this point? He's showed he's smart, and he knows his way around the Power Rangers wiki page stuff, so he knows his history on Power Rangers. I do like it for the sake of, okay, they did come up with the new weapons and stuff, so it does, involve, moving the plot along for Super Mega Force, but overall, if Jake and Gia were swapped, the two characters that would have made more sense, because again, Jake liked Gia did like Jake, although she played coy with him all the time. They did have feelings with each other, and this would have been the perfect episode to actually showcase that and show like, oh, okay, this is the reason why Jake is, cool or smart and whatnot. It would have been interesting to see that dynamic between the two. And it was one of those cases where the Super Sentai footage actually helped the Power Rangers episode out. And they just end up wasting it with just changing it to Noah. Logically, it does make sense it was Noah. It would have worked better if it was a Jake and G episode and just had Noah invent the new weapon for that episode.
Trading places.
Now for Samurai, this was a fairly weak episode. Now, it's pretty much a direct copy of what happened in the Shinkenger episode. Pretty much, everything happened. They got trapped in, different various objects, which is actually fairly unique because in Power Rangers case, whenever they do a body swap episode, they actually just swap into different people. This was kind of the first time they swapped into either inanimate objects or food, for example, with Antonio's case. They pretty much copied what they did in Shinkenger beat for beat, except for I think Jaden was changed into a gnome versus the Neko statue that they used in Shinkenger. I did like the concept. Like I said, I like that they went into inanimate objects. But again, because the characters really didn't get much to do in Samurai for the same reasons of Megaforce, it's a combination of, Samurai in general just copying everything from Shinkenger, dumbing it down, really feeling basic, so it ultimately feels just like a very bland episode that could have been interesting, but it just wasn't. And honestly, if I had to choose between Trading Spaces or the original Shinkenger episode it was based on, go watch the Shinkenger one. It was much more funny. That's the problem when it comes to the Neo Saban seasons, is that because we don't really know these characters that well, or their personalities kind of are jarring and they go all over the place. When you see it in Shinkenger, it was a comedy episode, and you liked it because it broke that little barrier down between all the characters who were very serious with the very goofy ones. In Samurai's case, because everyone is just like meh to like who cares, like Jaden's all over the place, Kevin especially, because they really didn't know what to do with him, so it's just ultimately you didn't really care, especially Antonio. The way they used him compared to Genta in Shinkenger, it was done much better in the original episode.
Monster Mixup.
Now, unlike the last two, Monster Mixup was not a bad episode. The premise of the episode was that the Rangers got swapped with 4 of 6 monsters, and they basically were going to take the fall for these, monsters. They had criminal acts. They were going to basically be killed. So the thing they had to do was figure out a way to get out of their bodies and prove their innocence from this weird court case. And I thought it was very unique for the Halloween episode. It worked as a bottle episode. And one of the things that was surprising is that even though Ninja Steel had so many problems, just like the other seasons I mentioned before, they had enough characterizations to feel fun. Because again, they were swapped into monsters and you were just, rooting for their survival, and they had to go and figure out what they can do. While it wasn't the greatest body swap episode, it was fairly unique, and I did enjoy this little side episode.
Freaky Fright Day.
Now, Freaky Fright Day, I didn't hate it, and it surprisingly, after all the other Dino Supercharge episodes that I really didn't like, it was an okay filler episode, and we did learn a little bit more about Ivan. We know his family line had continued on, and we met his descendant, Zach. The one thing I did particularly like about this episode, at least with the Dino Charge characters, we knew who they were, we knew their personalities, and they were fairly fun. So it was cool to see them mixed and matched. So especially like Tyler and Shelby, they like each other, so it made them extremely awkward with each other. Like Shelby is like, oh my god, I don't know what to do with this body and this and that. I was like, oh no, now I'm the Red Ranger, I don't know what to do, I have to be the leader. So you get to see her like stumble and fumble there. That's what I love the most about body swap episodes, is when the characters have to deal with the situations they're in, not just by there being in completely different bodies and you're like, well, what do I do, what the hell's going on, but it's the fact that, oh my god, now I have to interact with a sister I have no idea who she is. Another thing that I liked, that it was a unique way to use the footage, because the original episode that was used in Kyoryuger did not involve this at all. It was fun to see them poke fun at Power Rangers and them worrying about their roll calls while you're supposed to be fighting the monsters. It was a much better improvement compared to Samurai, Megaforce, and Ninja Steel.
The Makeover.
Now, the Makeover in Dino Fury, I was actually fairly impressed with it, because not only is it these traditional body swap episode from Power Rangers done before, but it did one thing that I kind of hated that Dino Charge didn't do, because remember, Dino Charge's Energems are bonded to the Ranger, right? So when you body swap the Rangers, the powers shouldn't work, so they shouldn't have been able to morph. But in the Makeover, Dino Fury actually thought about that. So when they initially attempted to morph, when their bodies were swapped, the keys didn't work until they realized, oh, we should be using our respective keys in the different bodies. It gave a little bit more of like, uh-oh, what are we supposed to do here? We can't morph correctly. But what's funny is that if you look back at this episode, you'll now realize Amelia would really have no problem being in Zato's body and vice versa, because they're from the same species. And I think the best body swap was Javi and Ollie, because they're the complete opposites from each other. And I think as the audience, you'll love to do to Ollie, because again, Ollie tends to be that dick character in the show, so he's always talking down to people. So you get mad at him. You like Ollie, but at the same time, you're like, oh my god, will you give everyone a break?
Switching Places.
Now, Switching Places, the very first body swap episode in MMPR. And the one thing that I really want to say is that, for the very first episode, it was surprising how well this episode worked, because, at the time, this was very early MMPR, and we didn't really know Kim and Billy at the time. I think another reason why it works so well is because, we know Billy is the most awkward of the Rangers, and whenever he's put into a situation that he's never been in, he kind of doesn't know what to do. He freaks out, he breaks down, and then in a way, it was a teaching episode too. Kim now has Billy's responsibilities, and he's a genius, and she's just a regular girl. I don't know how to deal with equations and science-y stuff and all this other nonsense. And I also think if you went to anyone who's watched MMPR as a child and they said, what was one of your favorite episodes that was not green with evil? I think a lot of people would pick Switching Places.
The Silver Switch.
Now, this one is a little bit more unique of a body swap, because it involves Steel and Nate. And Steel gets to understand what it's like to be a human. For Steel, he had no idea what it's like to be human. He doesn't have, taste buds, a stomach. So he understands some emotions, but not everything. He doesn't understand certain jokes, so he gets things wrong. So he grows as a character. So this was the very first time he was able to experience what it was like to be human. Another reason why I also like the episode, because, for the most part, Nate has been fairly perfect. Usually he's the genius, he builds everything, so you pretty much can rely on him. So this was kind of the first time where he goofed up and caused this mishap. I think this was the episode that kind of solidified me enjoying Steel and Nate. Compared to what they did in Go Busters, one of the weakest parts was Jin's story. I loved it because, again, it was emotional. Jin was dying in the series, but at the same time, it was so stretched out. Jin was about to die, they faked it, he survived, they faked it, and then he finally did pass and move on. So when Nate and Steel were much different from Go Busters' counterparts, I was like, wow, I actually enjoyed these characters. I enjoyed their journeys between becoming brothers and Steel becoming human.
Invasion of the Body Switcher.
This was one hell of an episode that, Ashley got body swapped with Astronema. One, it's so awkward. You got turned into the bad guy, and you have to act like the bad guy for the time being. Another reason why I love this episode so much was because it broke in space so hard. Space, for the most part, is serious. It doesn't do that many goofy comedy episodes. I think Grandma Matchmaker and the stupid dating episode with Zane was one of those other episodes that are very goofy. This one goes over the top, where it starts going back into Power Rangers Turbo Land, but then it actually is still good. That's the thing that I always found hilarious about this episode. It was so funny, especially with Elgar being in the episode, and it's like, I didn't mind him being in here. And I'm saying to myself, what happened with Power Rangers Turbo? Why does the comedy work so well within this episode, but then when we watch Power Rangers Turbo have all those ridiculous episodes, like, we always pretty much cringe to everything? One of the main reasons why this episode works so well is because Astronema has just been this evil, sick person. And that's all we ever see her as. And this is the very first time where we finally get to see her being, kind of like, oh, maybe I kind of doubting herself, because again, she's seeing the Rangers, she's seeing them as like these good people, and she doesn't know what to do. She's confused. If she's in this environment with Andros, even though she wants to kill him and kill the other Rangers, it starts waking up her lost and blocked memories. So on top of it being very funny, working very well, and not being pissed off at Elgar for a change, and on top of continuing the story in that subtle way, I think that's the reason why it's one of my favorite body switch episodes of the bunch.
Sensei Switcheroo.
But number one has to go to Sensei Switcheroo. It is the quintessential favorite body swap episode for me. Not because it makes like Shane and Dustin act like Sensei. Obviously, that's funny on itself, because again, Sensei has to basically take over the responsibilities of what Shane did. He doesn't know how to use his skateboard. Dustin seeing him being serious and whatnot. It finally got Sensei to be in an episode, because again, Sensei is this CG guinea pig, so he's expensive to use. We didn't really know who he was because of that. So when he got swapped into Dustin and Shane's bodies, we got to explore him. We got to see who he was, because we always hearing him as this great master, but we never got to see him do anything. Even though Ninja Storm mostly is a goofy season, it was a good middle ground of goofy, where it was funny, but it didn't go over the top, and it did progress Sensei Kanoi's backstory. Cam wanting to have his father back. His father was stuck in this body. He can't really talk to him in a normal sense. He's always trying to figure out ways to free him from this weirdness. That's probably one of the major things that, we tend to forget about Ninja Storm. While Cam is at the base, he's worrying about everything. The Rangers, making sure they don't die, build equipment, and then of course, worrying about his father. Will he ever turn back to being normal, or is he stuck in this weird animal body forever? Ultimately, the reason why the body swap episodes are really cool in Power Rangers is because the actors can finally get to do something else. While David Yost is playing Billy for 150 episodes, it's fun to see the actors do something different. I think also what makes it interesting is that it's a what if David Yost was Zach, or what if David Yost was Jason, for example. It's cool to see how the actors would have portrayed those characters if they were just simply cast differently. The only thing that the body swap episodes never really did was the Rangers body swapping into the monsters, but the monsters morphing with the Power Ranger powers. That I would have loved to have seen, how either the suit would have been changed, or would it just, turn them into their normal shapes regardless, because, like Doggy Kruger, for example, he doesn't have a nose. So it'd be kind of cool if they ever make a new body swap episode. I would love to see a monster morph with the Ranger powers. If you have a topic or a subject you'd like me to cover in a future episode, leave a comment down below and I may use it in the next video.